Welcome to User Insights, a podcast series powered by UXarmy.
Good morning, Simon. Thanks a lot for joining us for the User Insights podcast of UXResearch. We are pleased to have you here. Let me quickly introduce you to our audience who will be listening in to this podcast. So my name is Kuldeep. I actually am the co-founder of UXRmy. We have been running this user experience research company since quite some time now. And user experience research is at the core of what we do. Our product is about a user experience research platform that allows to do user research remotely. Our platform is totally AI based, and we are trying to strengthen the AI bit in it, and therefore your presence on this podcast is highly valuable. To introduce Simon to the audience, let me put two lines for the audience. So Simon lives in Canada, and Simon is a UX strategist, and he has deep interest in AI and user research. But I would let Simon introduce himself because I don't want to do injustice to his extensive experience that he has got in user research and AI. So Simon, yes, please welcome once again and introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Kuldeep. So as you mentioned, my name is Simon, and I currently work as a user experience researcher. But my background, I guess you could say classically trained as an academic researcher. I have a PhD in human perception. And so my interest lies in a lot of AI stuff, how it interacts with UX. But I think at a higher level, what interests me is how can you take research insights and have impact from them? So how do you bridge the gap between research knowledge and product impact?
Yeah, that's very interesting because you seldom find people who are user researchers and so deeply connected with tech as well as the cognitive side of things. And when I look at your profile, it seems you have that perfect blend, which is so very important for a user researcher in my view. I had the opportunity to actually be a part of product development as well in earlier part of my career. Now I'm more focused on our own product, and also AI is something that I wouldn't say we live and breathe, but we are also seeing and exploring use cases of using AI ethically and so on. So if we just dive deep into the topic of designing for the unknown, the whole AI scene seems to be having a lot of unknowns. There is no surprise to it. At the same time, there is no clear guideline or no clear picture about how AI would move forward or how AI-based user experience would be defined. Would there be rules or will there be challenges? So just curious from your point of view, what would be the unique challenges you think for designing user experience for AI-based systems?
Yeah, well, just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, AI is kind of like a meaningless term. So it doesn't mean anything technically. So I think what we're talking about is designing an experience that leverages large language models, so LLMs. At least that's the space that I'm in. And so just to take a step back, just to make sure that everybody listening to this understands the kind of what this technology is, because often we kind of think of it as like this magical black box. It isn't. It's a calculator for words. So it's this process that inputs something, and then based on statistics, it figures out what the likely next words should be based on the input. So you have your input, something happens, and we don't really know what happens. And then the output is what is probably the next words based on that input. And UI, the user interface that people typically associate with that, is a chat interface because of ChatGPT. But there's no real reason why we should have a chat interface for LLMs. And that's something that I think about a lot, this idea of what is the right UI for LLMs. I don't think it's chat. I think that OpenAI really sold their product with this UI, but I don't think that it really is is what we're going to land on for the long
Yeah, and it's anybody's guess where we are gonna go, because if you look at all these kinds of interfaces and all this buzz around the AI, yes, it's correct that the form we were born, the AI was born to the mass, was really in form of chat interface. It's an important point whether this chat interface will be totally obscured from the end user, which is in some sense being done. If you see the products that are coming out with AI, it's very feature driven. And maybe some tech enthusiasts and those people who just want to have a taste of AI, what AI is, they are probably just talking about Gen AI. And true sense, people have been working on on AI for like since 1960s, if you go into the theory. So from your point of view, how do you see this, the new wave of AI? Like, why is being said it's so close to changing everything in terms of products and product interaction?
Well, I personally, I don't think that it's, I think that my perspective on this, and I might have a different take on this, but I think that it's, we're being sold something. I think that when you actually work with this product, what you realize very quickly is that if you are working with an LLM, there's this really core UX problem that if you're working with an LLM that has a chat interface, you do not know fundamentally what the user is inputting, because the input space, like what the user can do, is basically as varied as the human language. Yep. And so if you have a room of 10 people and you ask them all to do the same task with the same chat interface, you'll have 10 different ways to approach that task. And so just because LLMs being what they are, that means that you might have 10 outputs. And the point of a product is to make sure, well, ideally, the point of a product is to make sure that you provide a valuable experience for your customers so that they buy your product. And with LLMs, the reality of this is you will never be 100% sure what user experience your customers are having based on, if you're basing your experience on a chat input with an LLM. And fundamentally, I don't think that's good for business.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen products in our space that are being built based on chat interface, and that seems to be a great sell, because some, like you say, some actually see AI as actually a form of interface. My personal opinion is also that is short-lived. It's the benefits that it brings that would be making much more sense, and I believe that it's the user benefit at the end of the day. And if the product doesn't perform consistently with the same quality over and over again, it ceases to be a product. At the same time, I think even if we move beyond those points, we end up in other points related to our research, and they are also things like, for example, how would the current research methods and so on that we have, how would they adapt when it goes to AI? Because the product format itself is a bit unknown. Everybody wants to rise to the wave as a product company. We are no exception to it. But at the same time, we can be slow or fast, or we could be thoughtful or rash. So I'm quite curious. How do you see that?
Yeah. Well, I think that and also just to add a bit of clarification on my previous comment about the chat interface for LLMs, I think there are contexts where it is good. But it is really hard to get right. And it's not just putting on a chat interface and sending an input to an LLM. Like, it's very, very difficult. And I don't think people kind of fully understand. I don't think UX and design people fully understand the complexity of it. But there is definitely a space for it. Going back to your question about research methods, you know what? I don't know what research methods work for conversational AI experiences. And the reason why that is because it's not linear and it's not predictable. And the closest thing that we have is conversational design, where you can see what people say along a journey, but the whole point of LLMs is you can say whatever in whatever way you want, and you don't really know what your model is going to output. And so that kind of it eliminates the constraints of a traditional research method. And
That's huge.
I just don't, I don't know how to do this at scale. And that's something that I'm working really hard on trying to understand. It's a great space to be in as a researcher because it's a really important problem. And we're pretty close to figuring out an aspect of it, but it's
it's exciting to hear that. And at the same time, I think it also sends a bit of some type of unpredictability around how the interfaces are going to be, because I mean, there are varying point of views. If you think of extreme, this can go right from being a chat interface to an interface where it's the whole LLM capability is completely abstracted, to a possibility where everything on your phone is reduced to one app, and that's voice. And all you do is basically order everything and get everything done just by conversation.
Cody, that to me is just the craziest thing in the world. Like it's crazy to me that people who have spoken with other humans think that's even possible. Like I'm sure you've been in conversations where you say something and the other human who you probably have an existing relationship with doesn't quite understand what you're saying, and they kind of like interpret you in a different way. And that's with two humans that have shared experiences, sometimes siblings, sometimes parents, sometimes people in your family, close friends. And then to think that a technology can do better than that is just so wacky to me. So, I mean, maybe they're selling something, but I don't think that's ever going to be possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are basically possibilities that so things can go as far as that, what we just discussed. But there are also possibilities that things are not exactly moving the way we predict at this point of time. Because I think the biggest issue that's being talked about about AI is nobody knows how things are going to be as time goes by, and only time can reveal stuff. So there is a bit of fear factor along everybody, no matter what role they are doing. But taking away the conversation a little bit in another direction, which seems to be one of your expertise, you have many expertise, is essentially how does the AI apply to, or even the user experience apply to legal tech in general? Because I see that's one of your expertise as well.
Yeah, well, it's so I work for a legal tech company, and the challenge that we have as it relates to what we spoke about with knowing the user input and knowing the user output is our products. Like in the legal space, you need to get the right answer.
Yep.
You can't kind of get it wrong a little bit. It needs to be right. And so it's a very interesting space to be in, because our UX just needs to be really solid. And so there's a ton of really smart people working on the technology side to figure out how can we make sure our inputs are good? How can we make sure everything works well? And then on the design side, there's a ton of smart designers trying to think how do we make it so that the user provides information that will allow us to give them the right answer. And it's good. It's a space that's moving really quickly, and there's good content in there. So good AI is based on good content. So it's fun. I'm enjoying myself.
I mean, design, it's exciting times we are living through, for sure. I think the problem in the UX design space is slightly even more complicated than the UX research space, because what to build when it's not even clear what the technology can bring in, and whether how long or how much this will persist in terms of whatever you design. So do you see at work or with your experience speaking to other designers in your field, do you see any themes emerging of what kind of products can be upcoming? What kind of experiences we are talking about in, say, 2 to 4 years, 2 to 5 years term?
Yeah. I don't know about time. Who knows where we're going to be in 5 years, but what I can tell you that I see right now is traditionally, and I would recommend any UX person listening to this who is not familiar with conversational design to take a look at that field. I think that what I'm seeing is the whole industry was just shocked when ChatGPT came out. And because it was a technological innovation, I feel like design kind of took a step back they were like, oh, this is a technology thing. This is not for us. We're just going to kind of focus on surface level designs. But the reality is that a conversational experience is something that there are tons of fundamentals on, tons of great thought out there on how to design a good conversation with a computer, with an interactive phone system. We know how to do this. And so what designers, I think, need to do is learn those fundamentals, learn the technology, learn how LLMs work, play around with them, understand prompting. And I don't mean prompting typing things. I mean the system prompts, like understand how you can guide your output based on your input. Just build things, play around with it. And then once you understand that, I think it becomes clear that the role of the designer is no longer to design something in Figma and send it off to a front-end programmer or something like that, but rather to interact with machine learning scientists. And that is a new skill set because we just don't know how to speak with these people. They're data scientists, they're people who have PhDs, and they're really just focused on their thing. And often they don't think about the user experience. And it's just, why would they? It's not their job. But it's our job as UX people to bring them into the conversation and to speak their language and to say, hey, I recognize that this output does not meet our content guidelines. So here is maybe a modified prompt that I put together that still keeps the quality of the output, but also aligns with what our content folks are putting together on the design side of things.
Yeah, I mean that view seems to be an interesting one, especially given the fact that there is so much of uncertainty around how the interface is going to be and so on. But definitely the natural language processing part is something that that designers must learn. I see your point. At the same time, I'm just thinking that there is so much of context awareness these systems need, and I'm just wondering that what kind of research and what kind of design, and this is anybody's guess. I mean, I practically should not ask you the question to give me an answer, but I'm not sure really what type of your world, how does it show when it comes to designing and understanding user context, because I don't know what kind of sensors and what kind of sensorial inputs, by sensors I mean that besides voice will be used in future products.
So my perspective is this is not new. Like, we're kind of freaking out about this and we're thinking this is new. The only new thing about this is that it's able to generate average outputs faster than a human. And so that's very easy to replace people because we can easily output average work for basically free. But when we think about the user experience, it's key to look at things that already exist. And so we were talking earlier about how, like, the input, if you do not know what a user is inputting, it's impossible to predict what they're outputting or what your product is outputting. So if we think about that as the problem space, we can say, all right, well, what are existing UIs that constrain what a user is going to input into a system? And you get to form design. It's really not sexy, but just forms, I think, are a design space that AI designers can really learn a lot from, because it's how do you get precise information from a person and guide them along a journey, and then, because we're talking about AI, format that into a prompt of some sort and then output something. But if you use thoughtful form design, I think that you can eliminate that variability that we were talking about earlier. And it's really boring, but I think if we're focusing on providing value to customers, we know how to do this.
I mean, a little thing that comes to mind is the banks, which are heavily under governance and regulations, and obviously these regulations are usually slow moving, and those regulations will take time to adapt to AI. And the big question is, if there is a form that's crazy long, because all those inputs are required to create an account on the bank website or something, then if all this input is coming via prompts, it's obviously going to make things easy, as well as it's a bit crazy as well if you think of scams, because it's possible that the person who is talking to the interface is no more a human. So that produces a kind of exponential complexity when it comes to dealing with all these situations where the AI interfaces are no more limited to just voice or text input or keyboard input, but they can vary in every form. So one side there is governance, the other side you have the basic form filling concept, which is converting to this into voice based interface. So really it's very hard to figure out what exactly should be the focus of designers when it comes to design these interfaces.
I understand your perspective. And I think that if you're a bank, for example, we know the LLM's vulnerability, and we don't need to get into a big debate about LLM security. But if you look at what we know, like SQL injections, like kind of database hacking and stuff like that, this is a huge issue. Well, it was a huge issue. And it's a form that people put something and they can extract data. And so what they did is put a filter on it. So put guardrails. And so if you apply that thinking to your bank example, instead of having a giant prompt window, chat interface to just put stuff in, and then like maybe it's nefarious, maybe it's somebody creating a bank account, but you have those inputs and you have that filtering, then you're really eliminating a lot of risk. And all it was is good design, good practices. And you can use tools, traditional UXR tools, to understand how people are using it. And I think that's the nice mix of LLMs with traditional UX disciplines.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I'm not sure what's your view about how the systems will get simpler, or will the system become more complex from a user point of view. Obviously, the answer seems to be that it will become simpler. But then it may not be always about conversation. It may be the intelligence layer may be abstracted with few things. So what are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean by simpler?
Simpler in terms of interaction. So today, if you see, there are interfaces that a certain group of people are unable to use. There are issues of accessibility, not just more inclusive interfaces. For instance, if you see even a mobile app, which is pretty simple for somebody out there, is not as simple for a non-tech savvy, let's say 60-year-old person. So in that case, there has to be some kind of parity that is expected to come. But I don't know if it is coming or not. The whole point is, where from that point of view, from a parity point of view, is there anybody even focusing on those things yet when it comes to the AI-based products?
Oh yeah. I work with several accessibility people who are working very hard on making sure that our products are compliant with WCAG and AODA. It's hard work, but when you're an expert in that field, there's definitely ways to do it.
So the usual advice that people give to UX professionals, because as professionals, we want to always stay ahead of the game. But in this case, the advice is usually pretty vague, and it's completely fine if that is not something that is straightforward or turns out to be, not exactly how things will turn out to be in this uncertainty. But still, what would be your advice to UX professionals, especially if you let's say distribute your advice from somebody who is like entering the field to somebody who is like already established in, say, as a UX researcher or a researcher for that matter?
Yeah, for a researcher, I think if we're talking specifically about AI UX, it's important for researchers to understand the technology and to understand how variable it is. And so my advice would be to play around with it. Build something very simple, something that is similar to whatever use case you're working with. It's very easy to build copycat products now. And build a copycat product, see how you would try to interpret that data, understand the challenges, and from there, try to develop new ways and just wrap your mind around the problem of that infinite input space and infinite output space. And very specifically, I'd say check out Gemini, Google's Vertex AI Studio, I think. It's very, very easy. There's multimodal uploads and it's free. And then I would also recommend getting familiar with conversational design. I'm a huge fan of the design tool VoiceFlow to design those things. See how that works. Show it to people. Try to do UX research. See how it integrates with. Understand tools like yours. See what they do, and then see how you might apply traditional UX research approaches to LLM experiences. See where it fits. See where it doesn't, and then wherever that gap is, trying to figure out something new and let me know.
Yeah, I think we are living in a space where it's all about keeping each other up to date, and also ability to keep track of what's going on, because things can change in a flash, and it's important to keep up to date. So yeah, great advice. I think this is what I tell to anybody who seeks advice from me, at least, that keeping up to date of what's happening, trying to get your hands around it, and so on, is the kind of aspect that I am also advising. So thanks a lot. I think we have come towards the end of today's discussion.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of User Insights. We hope you gained valuable insights from our conversation.